Hey everybody, Mateo here from Zpacks. Before we talk about what we put in our packs, let's talk about the psychology behind why we put it in our pack. What motivates us to carry each one of these items? So why do we pack what we pack? A lot of times it's because we think we need it. A lot of times it's because we think it's going to give us comfort on trail. But most of the time, it's because we're afraid. When we first start hiking, fear is usually the #1 driver in our decision-making process when it comes to the items we put in our pack. We're afraid of getting lost, so we bring that compass that we don't really know how to use. We bring a full set of maps that we don't really know how to read. And we bring a satellite GPS to save us and give us that helicopter ride out of the canyon that we know is coming. We're afraid of running out of food, so we bring more calories than we can consume in a day. Then we throw 3 extra days worth of food on top of it and end our hike with more food than we know what to do with. We're afraid of running out of water, so we carry 4 liters at all times while we jump rock to rock over stream crossing after stream crossing. We're afraid of freezing to death, so we pack a sleeping bag intended for an Arctic expedition. We're afraid of being stinky, so we bring a set of fresh clothes to sleep in, only to roll around in them with our dirty bodies all night. We're afraid of being uncomfortable, so we bring an oversized inflatable mattress and a camp chair. And when the sum of all these fears is added up together, we can end up with an oppressively heavy backpack. As our good friend Nimble Nomad says, our pack's burden is directly proportional to our degree of insecurity, the fear of the trail, that dreaded unknown. The greater our fear, the heavier our packs become. When we first start to venture out into the backcountry, being afraid is normal, and in my opinion, it's perfectly healthy. So when we sit down to fill our packs before a trip, we should not only think of what we're going to put in our packs, but why are we putting them in there? We need to understand how each item we put in our pack contributes to our base weight, and the way that weight affects our enjoyment on trail. Base weight is a term that refers to your backpack and all its contents, excluding consumables like food, water, and fuel. The weights of these items can vary depending on trip duration and expected weather conditions. A higher base weight is generally associated with greater strain on your muscles, more stress on your joints and impact points, greater risk for injury and fatigue, and an overall slower pace while on trail. With every step and every mile, the weight of your gear strains and stresses your body. The lower we can safely get our base weight, the less wear and tear on your body. Lower base weights can allow us to cover more ground in a day, to see more, to get to break spots and camps earlier, and generally do it all with less fatigue and strain on our bodies. The philosophy is pretty straightforward. Carry less weight and enjoy your time in nature more. You won't have to focus on the exhaustion and discomfort of lugging a heavy pack up to the top of a mountain. Now there's a very interesting phenomenon in backpacking that directly relates to the amount of weight carried, a momentum paradox. The heavier your pack is, the longer it's going to take for you to get to the next water source, which means you need to carry more water, which means your pack gets heavier, which means it's probably going to take you longer to get to the next water source, and so on and so on. The same rationale applies to food and the amount of days it's going to take to complete a section of trail. In practice, the additional resources required to maintain a heavy pack actually compound on themselves and make your pack even heavier. As you lower your pack weight, the opposite happens. You're able to move faster and less encumbered and get to the water source earlier, which means you get to carry less water, which means your pack is lighter, and so on and so on. So as you can see, the weight of your pack is directly correlated to a lot of the factors that determine the length, duration, and enjoyment of your trip. So how do we remove weight? Before we remove anything from our pack, let's ask ourselves, how can we save weight without taking anything out of it? A lot of hikers will start by doing things like cutting off labels, cutting their toothbrushes in half, and even cutting down straps. Now, the weight savings may seem minimal or even laughable, but they do add up. The logical and sometimes painful next step is to upgrade and replace some of your gear with ultralight versions. Ultralight gear companies like Zpacks have spent years developing lightweight equipment using state-of-the-art fabrics, optimal feature sets, and innovative designs, all in the spirit of allowing you to do more without compromising safety, form, or function. Hikers can achieve some serious weight savings when they swap out their old gear and replace it with some ultralight versions, especially when they focus on the big 3. The big three consist of your backpack, your shelter, and your sleeping bag. Upgrading from traditional versions to ultralight versions can save you as much as 6 pounds. Yes, 6 pounds. After the big three, I consider clothing to be the next biggest opportunity for weight savings. I actually call it the big four. A lot of hikers bring big, bulky, and heavy clothing that not only weigh down your pack, but also take up a ton of room inside of it. These garments can typically be replaced with items that use lighter and more technical fabrics. Not only will it take up less room in your pack, it will also reduce the weight of your pack. It's not uncommon to be able to find 1 or 2 extra pounds of weight savings just from analyzing your clothing. After you knock out your big three in your clothing, there's still a lot of opportunity to save some weight. The process is a little more laborious, but in my opinion, I think it's worth it. Let's go into full gram weenie mode. Now, let's take every single item out of your backpack and analyze it one by one, seeing if there's ways to modify it or replace it with a lighter weight version. Consider trimming down your map to only the section you need, or maybe only bring the pages of your data book that apply to this specific hike. Some of these weight savings may seem insignificant, but if you're able to save 1 ounce on 16 different items, you just saved yourself an entire pound. If you add up the potential weight savings between your big three, your clothing, and all your smaller items, it's completely possible to save anywhere from 6 to 10 pounds, all without removing a single item from your backpack. Now for the painful part. What can we take out of our pack? Before we take anything out of our pack, we really need to figure out what we do need in our pack. To do this, we're going to have to research our route. We're going to have to know the terrain, water availability, and the expected weather conditions. Only after we have this information can we truly analyze what may be left behind. Obviously, there are certain items that we would need on any multi-day hike. A backpack, a shelter, a sleeping bag, proper clothing, food, and water. Then there are things like your first aid kit and navigational tools like a map or compass. And when you're in areas with spotty GPS, a satellite device like an InReach or Spot GPS. Even with these things, we must be honest with ourselves and really consider, what are we bringing? Does your first aid kit include sutures? Do you know how to use sutures? Do you think you can magically learn how to use sutures when you're in a panic in the backcountry? Do you have the medical expertise to know when you shouldn't use sutures? This is probably the same questions you should ask yourself about everything in your first aid kit. There's a lot of room for opportunity here. The same thing goes for navigation. You plan on bringing a compass and a map? Do you really know how to use a compass and a map? Can you look at topographical lines on a map and geographical features and guide yourself to safety? If you don't know how to use something you're bringing with you, and you think it's important enough to bring, please take the time to learn how to use it. If it's not important enough to learn how to use, then you probably don't need to bring it. Another tip is to analyze gear that you've brought on previous trips. I've got a personal rule that if I've taken something on 3 consecutive trips and I haven't used it, safety and rain gear aside, I probably don't need to bring it on a 4th trip. I think that you can use the same approach too. After coming to terms with the necessities, it's time for the age-old battle, camp comfort versus trail comfort. Now have a serious conversation with yourself. Is it more important for you to be comfortable at camp or comfortable on the trail? Is the extra weight of a camp chair, a book, a machete, an oversized inflatable sleeping pad worth the extra strain on your body, mile after mile, step after step? For some people it is, and that's perfectly fine. It's also perfectly fine for us to push our own limits in terms of what we think will make ourselves comfortable. Every person has their own unique threshold when it comes to comfort versus masochism. And with more time spent in the backcountry, you'll find that that threshold is a continuously moving target. And with that, I'll give you one of my own personal sayings. The most important thing you can put in your backpack is experience. Experience allows us to replace gear with skills. I encourage everyone to go out on short practice hikes called shakedowns. Use these hikes to find out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. It's only through practice and experience that you'll learn what truly makes you comfortable in the backcountry. Regardless of experience, we should never feel pressured or shamed into going into the backcountry with a kit that we're not 100% confident will get the job done and keep us safe. Each person's setup will vary depending on their experience, their ability, and their comfort threshold. We must all acknowledge there's no one right way to hike, and everybody must hike their own hike. We've included a link to a sample 3-season gear list in the description below. We encourage you to take a look and hope it inspires you to look at your pack list in a whole new way. So get out there on some shakedown hikes, find a setup that works for you, and don't be afraid to challenge yourself. And see what taking a mindful approach to your pack can help you achieve. And as Nimblewheel so elegantly says, when you experience the joy of trekking unburdened, it is near magic.